Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am your co host, Jocelyn Turner. It's a beautiful, hot day in Northeast Florida. Um, I think it's unseasonably hot, but it seems to be, Dr. Kane, that it is our normal hot here in Florida. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing absolutely fine, but compared before we got this streak of, you say it's hot, but before we got this streak of coolness, remember we about 10 degrees hotter than what we are right now. So, I don't want our guests to think that North Florida is doing absolutely fine in climate change because we're still getting beat up like everybody else.
Yeah, we had a record number of days that were 90 degrees or above. So I think it's serious, and we are fortunate tonight to have a serious conversation about climate. It's a subject that if you don't know about it, we all need to learn about it. All you have to do is think about the number of days, as I just mentioned, that it was more than 90 degrees. People complain about their electricity bill, how hot it is for the kids to be outside playing, how hot it is for them to take a walk because their primary care physicians like Dr. Kane are, they're telling them, encouraging them to get out and walk, but people are just complaining it is too hot. About a couple of months ago, I attended the Florida Public Health Association conference and met these gentlemen, and they were so gracious to let me, I say, accost them, but come up to them, bombard them after their presentation, inviting them to join us in this conversation as they spoke about at the conference about climate surfaces. I'm like, climate surfaces. That's something that our audience needs to know about. So tonight we are having a discussion about smart surfaces for a climate ready future. Joining us are Dr. Jimmy Smith, Reverend John Robinson, and our local person, Christopher Smith. I will start with Reverend Robinson. If you could, Reverend Robinson, please tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got into this space of climate.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having us on for this very important conversation. I am Reverend Dr. John Robinson. You can call me John. And I am in the DC area at Metropolitan AME Church in DC. Um, just a side note, those of you who watch the news, news nerds and news junkies like myself, might recognize Metropolitan from the news recently. We successfully sued the scam artists formerly known as the Proud Boys not once but twice. And now the intellectual property, the name, image, and likeness of a white supremacist, white nationalist organization is owned by a Black church in the District of Columbia that just happens to sit about 2 blocks from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue,
I
which
love
is
it.
under occupancy or occupation by a wannabe fascist dictator. What got me into this work, I've been in clergy, I've been ordained clergy, I've been working in ministry in the church for 25 years. And I began when I was pastoring on the south side of Chicago about 10 years ago to see all of these intersections, and most of them intersected with extreme heat. And as I began to do some research and began to understand why it's hotter, in some cases 10 or 15 degrees hotter in the neighborhood I pastored on the south side than it is in a wealthy, white, tree-lined area, I began to unpack the fact that those disparities are driven by public policy. Public policy that has determined which neighborhoods and which people are worthy of investment in green infrastructure, worthy of investment in parks, worthy of investment in stormwater infrastructure, and which communities are not. So that sparked a passion. Justice has sort of always been the foundation of my ministry. So this is an extension of that. We're doing work with Christopher, with Jimmy, around climate adaptation and mitigation. So that's the Cliff's Notes version of who I am and how I got to this work.
Dr. Roberts, you left out one important fact, that you are a rapper.
Yes, sir. Mechanical University. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Second generation. Both of my parents met and fell in love at FAMU. And so I was proud to carry on the legacy on the highest of 7 hills in Tallahassee, Florida.
And fall in love with FAMU. All right.
We had to mention that, Dr. Kane, but thank you for alerting our audience about Reverend Robinson's connection to the Florida A&M University. I appreciate that. And wow, Reverend Robinson twice suing the Proud Boys. Wow, is all I could say. That's another conversation. Also joining us this evening is Dr. Jimmy Smith. Dr. Smith, tell our audience a little about yourself. And welcome, and you're muted.
What about now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Jimmy Smith. Please call me Jimmy. Certainly enjoyed meeting you down at the Florida Public Health Association. I serve a dual role in how I got in this space. I too am trained as a family physician, but since residency have actually done public health the entire time. So once I finished my residency and fellowship, then went to DC to work for, at that time, the Surgeon General, Dr. David Satcher, looking at health disparities and social determinants of health. That has led me into a career since that time of doing public health. So this was a natural progression, certainly as we address climate. I greet you in 3 ways. One, I serve as the president of the Georgia Public Health Association. I also serve for the next 4 years as a member of the American Public Health Association Executive Board. And I cannot leave this out since, you know, FAMU is all over this broadcast. I too am an HBCU grad, Johnson C. Smith University, Charlotte, North Carolina, 3rd generation.
And I must say, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to.
Look, I would just say I went there. We know not to play y'all in football, but I'm an old drum major too, so I'll take FAMU on anytime. We may be small, but we got a sound. So we'll come fight with you.
I must say my connection with Morehouse.
Oh yeah,
that you know, and Dr. Satcher, obviously, because he didn't start his career at Morehouse, but he was the guy at Morehouse for a fair amount of time.
Absolutely.
And then moved on to the rest of what he's
absolutely. So our part, or my part in this, is actually through our state, Georgia Public Health Association. We were one of the grantees under the American Public Health Association in looking at the impact of heat and flooding, particularly in the metro Atlanta area. So that's where I was able to meet Dr. John first, and then Christopher after that, as he helped us partner with one of the churches in Atlanta to do some focus groups, get some inside information, if you will, from folks, as it was not only affecting the church, but how it was affecting their communities. It also allowed our organization to stretch because in public health, many of the things we do are traditional, if you will, immunizations, environmental health, but environmental health in the sense of restaurants, tattoo parlors, tourist accommodations, animal control, building plan assessments. But this allowed us to also look at heat, and the science is overwhelming about the impact of heat as it has on health.
And I must mention, just real quick, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but Dr. Warren Hutchins and his twin. I don't know if you know those two guys. They were pretty significant in terms of their presence as far as Georgia Medical Association were concerned.
Yeah, Walter is my family physician.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I know them both well.
I knew Warren the best, but I also knew about his twin. So,
yep.
Dr. Kane dropping all these names tonight. And these school, I'm a Gator, by the way. I went to University of Florida. I didn't go to an HBCU nonetheless, but I digress. And last but certainly not least, Christopher Smith. Christopher, I must tell you, I looked up all of you so that I know a little bit more about you. But I looked you up after I realized you're a local, but you've been around in this space. So can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and welcome?
Yes, and good evening, everybody. Glad to be with y'all. I should start with, as a native Jacksonville, I'm 5th generation. And so I'm deeply rooted in this community, even though Jocelyn and I have spent my professional career elsewhere, primarily Miami and Jackson, Mississippi. But I'm back home due to COVID to be with family. And what brought me to this work actually was an issue, Jocelyn, around heirs property. And our outreach, Dr. Kane, on heirs property, it's a prevalent issue in the community where folks have inherited property without a will. And we've been helping folks resolve that issue by connecting them with legal services. And we do that at no charge to the household. And as a result, we saw the interlocking of housing security with climate risk. And so if you're familiar, as you are, Dr. Kane, with Ribault and Carver Manor and Harbor View and Lake Forest Hills, you know those are areas that are flood prone. And those same areas also have a high housing risk because there are folks who've been living there for 20, 30 years and in need of preparing to keep their home in the family and do it legally. And so we were fortunate to connect with John at a moment when we were trying to organize, Jocelyn, some of the neighborhood associations, Magnolia Gardens and Lake Forest and Riverview, and bring them together to learn about these climate issues while at the same time determine how we could stabilize the neighborhood with housing. And so that's what brought us into this space. Ribault River, everybody knows there's areas along Ribault River that flood. And so we wanted to bring attention to that and also understand what can be done around Ribault and Trout River to help clean them up and make sure they do not pose a threat to those long-standing communities along those tributaries. So that's how I come to this. I'm glad to be here. I would be remiss if I didn't add that I'm 2nd generation Wildcat from Bethune-Cookman. Glad to be with you.
So I'm the only one. I'm the only one who did not attend
HBCU.
an HBCU, but go Gators. Anyway.
Real quick. I'm right in the middle of the area that you're talking about. My office been for 25 years. I chose to be there. It's right in Riverview. I'm right at the bottom of Henry L. Kite. My office sits right there where you can flood and flood and flood. and I've dealt with that flooding, but the community is at so much risk that I've decided to stay there. And I've been there since 2000.
Yeah, there's a lot of need over that area. So you know exactly what we're talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm sorry. I digress. I'll let you guys go on ahead and let Ms. Turner go ahead.
So welcome and thank you all. So let's start by helping our audience understand smart surfaces. What exactly are smart surfaces and how do they work in urban environments? And either one of you can take that question, please.
So I guess I'll start because I'm the Smart Surfaces Program Director at Metropolitan. Before I do that, though, I think it's important, pun intended, to pause for the truth. So all of the issues that both Dr. Kane and Christopher have alluded to, Jimmy as well in his work, it is important to understand how we got here. So you all are familiar with people who like to label certain communities as low income and disadvantaged and all of these other things, as if those communities went to bed last night thriving and flourishing and prospering, and then woke up this morning low income and disadvantaged. The reality is that Riverview, Ribault, all of the communities that Christopher works with, that Dr. Kane's office is located in, that have 2 minutes of rain produces flooding that lasts for 2 days. These realities are created by public policy. It is not an accident that people who look like us live in flood-prone areas. It's not an accident that we live in communities that are 10, 15. In Dallas, the disparity is 20 degrees hotter, same time, same day, hotter than wealthier white neighborhoods. These are not coincidences. These things are the result of intentional, focused, and targeted public policy. So what Smart Surfaces are, the Smart Surfaces Coalition has looked at the built environment in communities that are dealing with the legacy of racism through redlining, environmental racism. The neighborhoods like Ribault in Jacksonville are literally built on the toxic ash from the city's trash incinerators that operated for 60 years, 70 years, from 1910 to the 70s. So Smart Surfaces says we have chronic disinvestment in green infrastructure in these neighborhoods. All of the surfaces, all of the horizontal surfaces. So think about all of the horizontal surfaces in a city. The roads, the sidewalks, the roofs, parking lots, all of those surfaces in neighborhoods that are chronically disinvested tend to be covered in dark, heat-absorbing, impervious surfaces. So you have flooding, you have extreme temperature disparities, you have higher instances of all of the respiratory diseases, hypertension, morbidity rates are lower, life expectancy rates lower, morbidity rates higher. All of those things are sort of the result of public policy decisions that have covered our communities in black asphalt, tar roofs, all of the, and at the same time, city planners have decided those neighborhoods like Ribault don't need parks, and the few parks they have don't get maintained,
Right.
despite the fact that city budgets have money for park maintenance. Somehow it can't find its way to the parks in Ribault. So Smart Surfaces says, let's look at the built environment in these cities and transform the surfaces. So it is a sort of comprehensive suite of services or suite of interventions that seeks to transform the built environment in chronically, historically under-resourced and under-invested neighborhoods.
Yeah, I like how you chose your words, because you're right. People don't think about, we talk about marginalized and disenfranchised, and we use all sorts of words. But the one thing, I was listening to the city council meeting here in Jacksonville, the one thing someone said when they were up for public comments is, we all want the same thing for our families. That's what people have to realize. We're all people. And unfortunately, the playing field was not always level. And so that's why there are things that should be put in place to make sure that it does happen. This is an exciting area. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about smart surfaces to make sure that we protect our future. Dr. Kane, you look like you had a question for, did either of the other gentlemen want to comment on smart surfaces and how they work in urban environments? If not, we'll move on to the next question.
Well, while they're thinking, let me just say this in response to something you said, Madam Co-host, because while it might be true that we all want the same thing for our families, the reality is that we don't all want the same thing for everybody else's family.
Yeah.
So because if we did, then the decisions about where to put manufacturing facilities that spew toxins into the air, water, and soil would not be made. If we cared about everybody's family, then we would not have redlined melanated families into flood zones. So I would take exception, and I do take exception when I hear people say things like that, because on the surface it sounds great. Oh, we all want the same thing for our families. Well, maybe, but how about what do you want from my family? And it's obvious what city planners and policymakers have wanted for our families historically.
I will say at least this, and it's just a modified form of what you said, and that is that they do want things for their families, while at the same time they want to make sure we don't get it.
100%.
That's why we call it pause for the truth. We speak up and make sure what's obvious is said, and that is we have people whom I wanted, just like what happened with Medicare, and that's a whole other story. We want it, but we don't want y'all to have it.
That's correct.
Yeah, and to follow up to a question that's been posted, what are our elected council people doing about this? I can tell you that there is a meeting actually happening right now, Breaking the Silence, Talking Climate here in Jacksonville, and that is being conducted by the St. Johns Riverkeeper, the Jacksonville Climate Coalition, and Climate Change. I can't look at the name of it anyway, and I don't see anybody reference to the city that are a part of that unless they're part of one of these coalitions. So in answer to someone who posted the question, so how do smart surfaces differ from traditional urban infrastructure like asphalt and concrete?
So what if I'll take the first shot at that, what I would say is it is certainly the use of our advancing technologies. So if we were to all go back into our neighborhoods, was there a time when, you know, we may have all started off on dirt roads, and then there were some roads that had bricks on, and then we were able to go to asphalt. So as our technology has progressed, we also see that there's been disparate distribution and how that has been done in many of the neighborhoods, and many of the neighborhoods that we now use those terms, high risk, disenfranchised, disinvestment. Many of those have a very common pattern, and that if you look at them, most of the folks in them are minorities. Now that can be African American, that can be Hispanic, that can be other. It goes into redlining issues, and I think John was right. Part of this is we have to have not the angst, but the culture to speak. Not pause for the truth, say the truth so much that you can't lie about it no more. You don't, it's like baseball. You practice not to get it right. You practice till you don't even know how to get it wrong. Right. So part of this goes into that policy piece. So as when there's an issue, many people tend to show up. But then after that issue seems to pass, then everybody's kind of gone again. So what one of the things we need to do in this is, first, we need to learn about the topic, which is the purpose of us of being here tonight. Two, as we begin to learn about that topic, have conversations with other folks of how this is affecting our communities. So when you say, man, that tree's been there and I wish they cut it down. Well, you're not realizing what are the implications for cutting down that set of trees. Not having a park here, or we'd rather, what would we rather have in our recreational area? Many times we put things in and say, hey, it's for the kids. And it certainly is. And it may be courts and other things. But when you take out all of the trees, then sometimes it gets too hot for those kids to even go out there and play. Yep. I'm in Georgia. My son used to play baseball when he was small. And we would go to some of these very rural counties. And man, they didn't have to beat you with the umpire. They put you on a ball field where there wasn't a tree within a quarter mile of that ball field and play you at 12 o'clock in July.
Yep.
You lose because of the heat. You just couldn't stand it.
Wow.
So it's those kinds of things that we have to do. And when we start thinking about trees in our neighborhoods, we start thinking about sidewalks in our neighborhoods. How are they maintained? How are they rehabbed when it needs to be rehabbed? Are you putting the same thing over it? So now you got the same problem. You still have a sidewalk, but you still have a problem. When we're putting roofs on our homes, are we using the traditional materials, or did we even know that your roof may look the same, but it may act differently because there's a either a chemical in it or a color change in it that reflects heat better that you may not even notice, but you will certainly notice in your house when that attic cools down 4 or 5 degrees.
Wow.
There's a reason in many of our neighborhoods where in the evening around dusk or late evening, you see everybody sitting on the front porch. It's too hot to go in the house.
Yeah.
We have to wait.
Speaking of times, like you say, there's certain points in the day that you start getting all this heat and stuff. Even when it came down to the Rattlers out there marching in that tremendous heat during their the marching 100, doing all those times that they out there marching in the middle of the day. At least Tallahassee had a lot of trees and woods, and it was not quite as hot as if they were trying to do the same thing here in Jacksonville, where we got Edward Waters trying to do the same thing the same time of day. That is such a tremendous heat difference that I don't know how tolerable that will be for their marching band versus ours. And it's not about rappers, it's all about what you're saying, climate change. I do want to ask one quick question, and I'm going to seem like I'm very ignorant. I know these tarred surfaces, and maybe I'm getting ahead of the game. These tarred surfaces, these paved roads, and so on and so on. We need to have more absorptive surfaces, correct? Where they're absorbing one water and two some of the heat and so on and so on. Does it make any sense to start drilling those holes in the pavement so water can at least start draining through that tarred surface that we see? I don't know. I'm asking.
So it actually makes more sense to just change the surfaces altogether, right?
Monetary.
But also, in the short term, it makes more sense, and in the long term, it makes more sense. And to Jimmy's point about evolving technology and the disparate distribution of that technology, I think that's spot on, and that's a very good observation. Because we have the technology. It's not like we need to go out and invent some stuff.
Gotcha.
Cool pavement technology exists. Cool roof equipment and cool roof materials exist. What the Smart Surfaces Coalition has been doing, this gets to the question that was asked by somebody in the audience, is not only are we doing investment in the community at the ground level, but we also have folks working with city councils, working with mayor's offices around policy. So we're taking a macro level approach and a micro level approach at the same time, which we think is one of the fastest ways to actual transformation. So if you arm communities on the ground with the resources and the tools to innovate, and then you enforce that in policy at the city level, then you've got a comprehensive approach that can not only pay short-term benefits, but also ensure that our children and our children's children, it's not so hot that they can't even go outside. Because everybody keeps saying that this past summer, this is the hottest summer on record, right? And they said that in 2024, and they said that in 2023, and they said that in 2022. So somehow that message is not necessary. It's not resonating because we keep blowing past, breaking records that shouldn't be broken. So here's a better way to look at it for your audience. Here's a better way to look at it. If we don't get our stuff together, and I'm trying to be nice and watch my tongue because we're on the air.
We don't care.
He doesn't.
If we don't get it together, this past summer will be the coolest summer we ever experienced again.
Wow. I was just about to ask John, what does the research say, or either one of you, about the public health benefits of smart surfaces, especially in lower income neighborhoods?
Yeah, I'll let Christopher, because he just muted. Or Dr. Jimmy would be better equipped. We've done some comprehensive research around the benefits in terms of respiratory health, in terms of and this has impacts that we don't even think about. But if it's as hot as it is in some of these neighborhoods, then our children cannot even learn. But they're in schools that are too hot for them to learn. And so you have missed educational days. What are the long-term impacts of cutting the school year short because it's too damn hot to go to school? You have impacts in terms of city employees and other workers and the missed days associated with extreme heat. Like, you can't expect people to work outside when it's 100 degrees air temperature and 115 heat index. So I'll pause there. Jimmy, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I was going to let Chris go first, and
Yes.
I'll follow him.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to tie in a couple of things I heard. One is to bring it home. Jimmy, in Jacksonville, we got a lot of septic tank households, and in the Rebald area we've been talking about, you had a high concentration of septic tanks. So JEA has been doing a phase out program. They've been moving people from septic, Dr. Kane, to Jack's water and sewer. Okay. And when they've been doing it, all they have done, though, is put the same concrete service down that was there before. So there was a missed opportunity there, Madam Host, to actually provide a permeable surface and perhaps even lower their tax bill, because a lot of people don't know there's a stormwater benefit. You can reduce your fee if you implement certain impervious paver or other ways to reduce your stormwater bill. So that's just, I want to bring it home, just an example of JEA gonna be doing this for a minute. There's a lot of people still with septic tank, and they have a chance to change their policy and integrate some of this smart surfaces into the program so that future phase outs can actually get multiple benefit to that household and lower their bill over the long term. And I throw it to Jimmy.
Yeah,
Well,
go ahead, Dr. King.
Dr. Smith, we should find ways of making sure our people here in Jacksonville locally advocate to the city council, but you got to beat them, with a baseball bat across the head sometimes, because they ain't as smart as they need to be. I said it, okay. But they ain't quite as smart as they need to be. That we need to advocate that they go out and look out what's best for their community and start advocating to JEA and those other entities that are not fulfilling the needs for our community.
And you asked about the public health implications. So certainly I can speak more to it, what was going on in Atlanta and some of the policy that was passed there. But you had neighborhoods, as John had said before, were 10, 15 degrees hotter, depending on where you were. So it could have been because of the age of the roof. And think about it, roofs need to be replaced over time. So as that roof began to age, it doesn't work as well, may keep the water out, but the heat is still coming. Tree-lined communities. We do, from a public health standpoint, we know that science will tell us the life expectancy of someone that lives in a neighborhood with sidewalks is usually longer than those that live in communities without sidewalks. And part of that is just because of the monies or the investment that's put into that infrastructure of that neighborhood and what those folks have access to. So it doesn't mean because you live on street that doesn't have it, you're not going to have a long life. You could. You absolutely could. But the quality of that life also depends on everything that's done to maintain that over time. And when you start off at a higher level, it is easier to gain and actually harder to lose, because you're going to fight not to lose what you have. So certainly temperature differences, and it's an impact on health. When you take just the temperature difference and ask someone, in our communities, we have lots of hypertension, we have lots of diabetes. So when you add that additional stress of heat, and it causes that cortisol hormone in your body to be elevated and stay elevated, it has implications on everything. So that heat now affects your blood pressure. That heat now affects your glucose level as it relates to diabetes, just for the two of those. That heat means you may need to stay hydrated more, but when you stay hydrated, that needs to be with water and not sugary drinks.
Right. And that includes, the infant maternal mortality rate that we may be experiencing in our neighborhood greater than other neighborhoods is what my concerns are. Greater than other neighborhoods, that infant mortality, maternal mortality rate are higher in those neighborhoods. I'm not sure how much epigenetics play in that, because of the other things associated with climate change and all other contamination related stuff. But all of that needs to be considered when we start monitoring the issues that concern our neighborhoods as far as it concerns climate change and the impact of climate change. Epigenetics not being dismissed, because we do have to look at next generation.
And one thing I would add, I would want all of our folks to understand, it's not a one size fits all type of treatment for this. It depends on where you are. So in Atlanta, there was a policy passed called the Cool Roof Ordinance, where any new commercial building that's built in the city of Atlanta must use, say, what we call this cool roof technology to try to cool those down. Now, if you need to patch something on your roof, anything that's not a complete roof, you don't have to fall under this. So if you got a place where, I don't know, something fell on your roof and put a hole in it, you can certainly fix that. You don't have to come and replace the whole roof. But if it's a new commercial or residential structure, it has to use this technology. However, if there's some great work that's being done by partners in Louisiana where they didn't necessarily first focus on roofs. Certainly they have the heat, but they also have a lot of rainfall. So they put in water gardens where they knew certain plants absorb more water than another kind of plant. And just to watch them present that in their slides, I was like, wow, I wouldn't have known this. But they put those trees in there and bushes in there, and then suddenly they didn't have flooding in neighborhoods.
Interesting. Real quick, I'm gonna say this, Mr. Turner, sorry to be throwing it out. But personally, remember I told you guys I've been there for like 25 years. I just had my roof replaced. And when they pulled up, some guys were coming in talking about just spraying over the roof, putting whatever the material is. But I happen to have a nephew that sees some roofing industry. So I replaced the whole roof. What he found up under that roof really startled me, because there was concrete on the roof. I was astounded to find out that I had concrete on my roof, the office. And I don't know the pros and cons of that, but it was just amazing that concrete was there. I don't even know what to say about it.
So you got concrete and dark colored roofing material?
Yeah.
And how many bedrooms is it? How many bedrooms in your house?
Well, no, it's not the house. This is my office.
Oh, your office.
Yeah.
Right.
The office is 3,100 square feet.
So you were sitting in a 3,100 square foot oven.
Exactly.
You've been working 3,100 square foot.
Air conditioning system in, but I digress.
Well, so let me respond real quick to what you said about life expectancy. And again, right, we need to pause for the truth. These are statistical facts. So in Jacksonville, Florida, the average life expectancy for white residents is 78 years. It is 72 for black residents. So 6 years. Now, if you go to Chicago, this almost 10 years, like 9.5 years difference between white and black life expectancy. And so what we, when we start looking at it from that angle, what we have done in terms of our tax dollars, in terms of our support for one political party or candidate or another, is we have subsidized inequality that is killing us. And not only have we, so we are currently subsidizing public policy and inequity that is killing us.
My mama used to say whenever we used to go, when I was a young kid, went to this place and they made me come through the back door and waiting there for some burgers and stuff for a couple of hours. She came in, well, what? They haven't served you yet? I said, no, ma'am. I was about 6 or 7. Say, no, ma'am. She says, come on, let's go. I'm not going to pay anybody to kiss their ass. Excuse my language for those that are listening. But she was determined that she wasn't going to pay anybody to kiss their ass because they were asking for her money. So why should I go there and support them?
Well, and to that point, so this also gets to the question earlier around what are city councils doing. And so this is why programs like this and conversations like this are so important. A very good friend of mine has been doing this kind of work in Philadelphia on the radio for the last 10 years. And the viewership or listenership of the audience grew to the point where there began to be a shift in critical mass of people who are informed about climate issues. And it's to the point now that in Philadelphia, residents will not allow mayoral candidate forums, city council candidate forums. They will not allow those forums to proceed without the candidates having to address climate. They have to articulate a climate policy. They have to articulate climate priorities and climate goals. Otherwise, they will be run out of the room. And so what we hope for is, sort of a similar wildfire-like transformation across all of our cities, so that in Jacksonville, when the next mayoral election or campaign gets underway, that whoever decides to throw their hat in the ring better be able to speak to all of these issues that we're talking about. They better be able to speak to not just what's happening in Bay Meadows and some of these wealthy white neighborhoods in Jacksonville, but what's happening in Reebok, what's happening in Riverview.
So how do smart surfaces connect to broader issues of climate justice and infrastructure equity?
So I'll be happy to answer that question, but I feel like I've done quite a bit of talking already. So I'm trying to give my brother an opportunity.
So as we talk about equity, access, and community impact, go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little bit of lag, but one of the things is related to something we touched on earlier, which is for residents who have bought and invested in along the waterways, the St. Johns River tributaries, they should not have to face increased costs due to the lack of infrastructure in that area, primarily related to Dr. King insurance, number one. Okay, so you're gonna see higher insurance rates. You got to have flood and homeowners in order to live over in that area and protect your assets that you work hard for all your life. So one is related to that. Two is if one is to live over there now, Ms. Jocelyn, now they're talking about, well, if you're going to live over here, now you got to think about higher ground. Now you got to raise your house in order to avoid those floodwaters that may occur when there's a heavy rain, particularly on the Reebok and Trout. So I think something around this idea that we need to get local government to move the water away from homes and humans so they are not in harm's way, is a necessary investment, not only in the people there, but frankly, industry. So one of the things we hadn't talked on, I go out in that area quite a bit, and I can tell you, people still fish over there. You still got crabbers, okay? You still got oystermen. You still got people out there fishing for subsistence. And what we need is a better understanding of what's in that water.
Yeah.
Okay? So testing, but also awareness needs to be had. And if there's a need to do any kind of remediation, any kind of mitigation, then those items need to be moved up the CIP investment board. And they shouldn't be 5-10 years away.
But Christopher, I remember the conversation about folks over about, I think it's Washington Heights, where it floods, and the conversations that that people should not be living over there. Some city folks have been telling them that, but folks, they don't want to move. I don't know if they don't want to move, they can't afford to move, or a combination of both.
It's definitely a combination of both. What was being offered was some kind of a buyout package, but frankly, Madam Chair, I don't know where they could have moved with that package. Wasn't enough. Okay, so if you're not offering enough for people to have options for them to be able to live in a similar manner, then it's really no option. You're really saying we don't value you enough, as John said earlier, to be able to make that investment in you. Go ahead.
If we want to speak to reality, one of the things that I look at, and you can tell me, you guys know more about it than I do. If you're not getting those flood waters going into the St. Johns River to a great degree, and the St. Johns River being one of those few rivers that go from south to north and flowing out into the ocean, if you're not getting enough flow out into the ocean, does that not increase the probability that the ocean floods into the St. Johns River and downstream? I'm not a St. Johns River keeper, but just St. John for the other gentleman is the river that runs through and split Jacksonville into north, east, west, and south. To a great degree. So,
Dr. King, you got Moncrief Creek. Again, you got these tributaries that run off the river now.
That's what I'm saying.
Moncrief Creek over in the bottom, a lot of that area still flood. You know that. So it's that issue. And then it's also true, when they did the dredging years ago, where do you think all that soot went? It carried right upstream, north, into these areas now. And so, yes, we cleaned up downtown and we got the river cleaner in that area. But when you dredged, all of that ended up going upstream. And that led to more challenges now for folks who live in that Moncrief, Ribault, and Trout area.
Yeah, and to one of the questions that were posted, how can we ensure that smart surfaces are deployed equitably and not just in wealthier or newly developed areas?
Yeah, so go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you look at the policy that was adopted by the Atlanta City Council, and though it was adopted, it will not take place for a year. So there was a compromise made during the vote of City Council, even though it passed with overwhelming support. Instead of being adopted in 90 days, they decided to make it 1 year. That was a compromise for those builders that said, hey, we're not against this, but give us time to figure out how we're going to make this work, basically with the numbers in terms of changing our materials and those things that we use. So how do you make it equitable? If you look at that policy, it covers all commercial buildings. It covers all new residence buildings. So it doesn't penalize those folks that have a home that need a repair and say, okay, just because you're making a repair, you have to use this new technology. But if you do have to replace your roof, it now puts those contractors and builders on notice. This is what you need to use. That councilman and her team have done a very good job. The difference in cost between using, say, cool roof technology and those, we're still talking about shingles and other things, is only about 2 to 3 cent difference in square foot per square foot. 2 to 3 cent. We're not talking about $2 to $3.
Right.
2 to 3 cent per square foot. So it's a minimal cost that has long-term implications. So when you do it, you, as the gentleman said, you just don't do it for one area. This is going to cover the entire city of Atlanta. And there are other pieces of that, of when you're looking at when you're going to plant trees, that plans have to be in place. How much of the city did you look at? You're just not going to be able to get away with looking at, say, the north side and don't look at the south side of town. You're going to have to bring this documentation. And now that has been put into policy, so you have a way of tracking what should happen.
That was
So, Dr.
what
Smith,
one of our listeners just just posted, and that is, and Christopher, especially you would know, all these monies being spent in San Marco area. For those that don't know, that's the rich part of Jackson. I'm not gonna say rich, but that is one of those areas that's coveted by non-Caucasians. Is a lot more so than I'm sorry, non-black folk than the Caucasians in terms of where all those monies are being spent. But I think some of that San Marco flooding occurs as a result of what we're seeing that happens to Ribault and these other places where that water begins to back up, and those places are not flowing out into the Atlantic Ocean, but then now begin to back up along the St. Johns River, and that San Marco area is the St. Johns River split that right into the San Marco area. So, Christopher, you can maybe address that if it's possible.
Well, Dr. King, I'm not an engineer, but
Right.
I know my eyes see.
Yeah,
That's right. We done built some big bridges in Jacksonville. We had Acosta, the Fuller Warren. We built 295 around it. We've engineered quite a few things. So you can't tell me we can't engineer a solution to address this flooding issue in that Ribault area. It is just a matter of will. And so in San Marco, Matahost, they put a pump station. That's basically what they did. They built a pump station that has begun to solve the problem. Hadn't eliminated, but it was a move towards a solution. What we need is to hear and see what is a move towards a solution to this long-standing, chronic life and safety issue in the Ribault area. That's what we need.
So let me add on to that real quick.
As a follow-up to that, I want you to answer this too, John. Hold on a second, because it kind of leads to my next question. So how are cities like Baltimore, Phoenix, and Miami implementing smart surfaces, and what can we learn from them? I don't know if that's a part or could be a part of your response as well.
Well, sure. And I think it all ties together, because what Christopher is talking about in terms of engineering, right? So you can't tell me that we don't have the engineering prowess. You also can't tell me that we don't have the money, because Jacksonville taxpayers, y'all about to subsidize $750 million for a new stadium.
Yeah.
I don't want to throw any aspersions or cast shade on the Jaguars, but $750 million for a team that's never sniffed the Super Bowl sounds a little outrageous to me. That's just me. So if you can afford as a city to subsidize a billionaire's fantasy, then you can do some of these other things we're talking about. Why does a billionaire need a penny from taxpayers for his playground? That's another sermon for another time, but it gets to the question about how we hold folks accountable, right? You show up to city council meetings and you ask those kinds of questions. Where in the world where are we getting $775 million, but we can't afford to renovate a park in Ribault? Where are we getting $775 million? We can't afford to put green infrastructure in some of these other places. So that's one piece. To get to the second piece of your question, Madam Co-host, around what cities like Baltimore and other cities are doing, Jimmy's talked about what Atlanta is doing in terms of policy and legislation. The same work is happening in Baltimore. So Baltimore passed a similar cool roof ordinance 2 years ago to what Atlanta just passed earlier this year. And so it mandates that new and replacement roofs need to be cool. And there are a lot of things that constitute a cool roof. It could literally just be the color that it's painted. And there are plenty of roofing materials, light colored roofing materials that reflect heat, that keep Dr. Kane, your office, from being a 3,100 square foot oven, right? So the heat bounces off instead of being absorbed into the building. The other things that cities are doing, a lot of cities now, including Jacksonville, have either they call them resilience officers or sustainability officers, but it's a branch within the city government that looks at some of these issues. But again, titles and government offices and positions are only as strong as the people those offices represent. Everybody in Jacksonville City Council, everybody in Jacksonville City government works for the residents of Jacksonville. And so it's incumbent upon your listening audience to hold those people who have those positions, who've been elected to those offices, to hold their feet to the fire on all of these issues and to ask the kinds of questions that we are beginning to raise on this podcast, that we hope will be asked, so much so that they'll get tired of seeing Kenneth Jones, who's asking great questions tonight. They'll get tired of seeing, they'll be, oh, here comes Kenneth Jones again.
So if you could ask, if any of you could advise the mayor or city planner on one smart surface investment, what would it be and why?
Wow.
So
While my brothers are thinking, I'm going to say it's green infrastructure. So whether that's parks or rain gardens, but there are so many studies, right? There are many studies that show a direct correlation between crime and tree canopy. So in places that have higher tree canopy, crime rates drop, right? And then that relationship is inversely proportional as well, because where there's lower tree canopy, then crime rates rise. So I would pick green infrastructure if I had to just choose one, because of the ways in which it intersects with all the other things we're talking about, flooding and heat, but it also provides mental health and aesthetic benefits. Nobody wants to live in an urban jungle, right? In fact, there's an old hip hop song that says, like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. Nobody wants to live in a concrete jungle. So that would be my intervention if I had to choose one.
Pastor, you most certainly yourself with hip hop, it's old folks hip hop like me, like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder why I keep it going. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things, if I had to give advice, I certainly would agree with that. But I would tell that elected leadership, plan for the life that you won't be here to see. And to do that, you've got to give folks the opportunity to be in place to help serve your community long after we're no longer here. So there are a couple of things. So as you look at that green infrastructure, use your academic partnerships. You have students, undergraduate, graduate in those communities, technical school, 2-year school, 4-year schools that have great ideas and the great capacity to learn. So give them the opportunity to sit in those meetings, hear those arguments, learn those different ways of doing things. So then they become advocates for their own community. We have too many of our children that leave our community to go to school, but then don't come back because there's not an opportunity for them to do certain things. So I would say certainly one, work with your local schools at all levels. It doesn't just have to be the high research institution. Who do you think are putting down those roads? Those are those folks that are in your 2-year institutions. They need to understand this technology. The second thing would be invest, even though you may think it's going to be a thorn in your side, teach your constituency about policy and advocacy and that process. So as we do that, we're teaching our younger folks, it's important. We all thought it was important when our kids were small to go to the PTA meeting. And then somehow it wasn't as important when they got to high school. It's even more important as they got older.
Yes.
So just as we have folks that will show up for a church conference, we need folks to show up at the city council meeting. If no more than to say, okay, I didn't understand a word they said, but here's the agenda and here's the minutes. And it's my job to bring it back to somebody else. And I need you to review this and then be able to share it with us. Our communities have thrived throughout generations because we helped one another when I may not be the one that needed to lead, but I was the one that could be present that day. So we've got to be able to do those things. And then the third thing is, one, don't ever settle. In those same communities you talked about in Jacksonville, as he said, if somebody was going to offer a buyout, but it really doesn't offer an option for that person to have enough money to move. And then 15 years later, you find, well, wait a minute, now they're doing work over there. Now it's suddenly livable. Let's invest in our own communities now, or push for that investment. So as Chris said, that our air property really keeps its value so we can pass it down to heirs in a proper way. So we then begin to have generational wealth.
Well, guess what, guys? We could go on and on. This is one of Dr. Kane's favorite topics and becoming my favorite topic. And I'm so happy that I had a chance to meet you all in Orlando at the FPHA conference. But it is the end of our hour, and we do like to respect your time and give you a chance at this time to share your final thoughts on tonight's topic. And I will start with Christopher.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure being here, y'all. I would just say, let's take the tax revenue that the neighborhoods in that area I've been talking about tonight, Ribault and Riverview, Harborview. Let's take that tax revenue they generate, they pay into the city, and let's turn that back into infrastructure investment for that neighborhood. Let's take that same taxes they pay in and put it right back in the neighborhood. That's what we ought to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, what are your final thoughts?
Again, I would certainly thank you for the opportunity to address your audience. I would encourage them to the states that we mentioned this evening, South Carolina, Maryland, Georgia, Louisiana. Do a search, look at what they're doing, and to be able to take those interventions that have been put in those other places and see if they will fit your current community. Don't be afraid to reach out to the folks that are doing this work in this space, because I guarantee you anyone would want to share that to make sure that it moves and is shared with other folks.
Thank you. Thank you. And last but not least, John.
Yeah, so I will share two things. One, we've talked and touched on it already this evening, which is for your listening audience to be a regular fixture at all of these meetings, school board, city council, et cetera, and keep raising the questions, keep asking about equity, keep asking about equality, keep asking about justice, keep pushing the issue, because that's the only way change takes place. And then the second thing I would say is in Jacksonville or wherever you might be, I assume your audience is broader than just Jacksonville, but particularly in Jacksonville, find an organization like the one Christopher leads that's doing this kind of work and support that organization. It is said that all politics is local. If that's true, then certainly all of the transformative work that's going to make a difference in our communities is hyper local. So find an organization like the Local Initiative Support Corporation. Find an organization that's doing this kind of grassroots work and get involved with that organization. And then finally, you can find us at the smartsurfacescoalition.org. Go ahead and put in a shameless plug. And you can find out all of the member organizations that make up the Smart Surfaces Coalition, and find partner and affiliate organizations in your city, in your state, that are doing this work, and lend your support to them.
Not a shameless plug. We want you to do that. And I'm going to backtrack and ask Christopher to also mention his organization, especially since he's local.
Yes, thank you. It's LISC Jacksonville, and we are at lisc.org /Jacksonville, and you can find us there. And our executive director, Dr. Irvin Pedro Cohen, and our team be happy to work with you.
And that's LISC Jacksonville.org, right?
That's correct.
Well, thank you all. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts as we close out tonight's podcast?
I know we've been holding these guys more than overtime. One thing is, if you guys just can hold on after we finish the program, just want to run a couple of things past you. It'd be quick and dirty as I speak. One thing is, I love the idea of investing in our communities, and especially you guys have mentioned, we need to get back to communicating to our communities options that they have, especially as it relates to our elected politicians, and making sure that they represent what we want as the electorate to be done for our communities. I also want to make sure that I thank Dr. Robinson for getting rid of the second branch of the KKK when you went after the second branch of the KKK when you went after the Proud Boys. You did just like they did with the KKK. You named them, you owned them, and I appreciate that. And a lot of people just don't realize that happened. And then finally, I would like to make sure that we thank you guys for coming on, enlightening us as a whole lot of opportunities and things that we need to do as a local community. We need to treat one of you guys mentioned about the PTA going to their meetings and so on and so on and so on. The city council is the second generation of the PTA as far as I'm concerned. If you want to look at look at your kids and grandkids' future, I'm an old guy. So, if I'm lucky to have 10 more years, I'm lucky to have or blessed to have 10 more years. But my kids and grandkids are looking at another 30, 40 years, period. And I want to leave behind for them, not just an inheritance of money, but an inheritance of the earth where they can, you can have all the money you want to, but if you can't breathe, you won't be living. So I appreciate you guys coming on and enlightening our audience as to what's going on. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kane, and thank you so much to our incredible guests for sharing their insight and passion on tonight's episode of Pause for the Truth. We've learned that smart surfaces are more than just innovative technology. They're powerful tools for climate readiness, public health, and community resilience. From cool roofs to green infrastructure, these strategies can reduce extreme heat, lower utility costs, prevent flooding, and most importantly, create healthier environments for all of us, especially those in underserved communities. If you're listening and wondering how to get involved, remember, you can advocate for smarter surface policies in your neighborhood, support city leaders pushing for equitable climate infrastructure, and educate others about how something as simple as a white roof or a shade tree can change lives. Visit our website at pauseforthetruth.com for a list of resources, links, and tools mentioned during today's show. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this episode with your network. Until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and always pause for the truth. Good evening.
We appreciate you spending time with us on Pause for the Truth. Ms. Jocelyn Turner and Dr. Rogers Kane are grateful for your support. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, catch us live on Twitch, and most importantly, subscribe on YouTube. A big shout out to Tyrone Jackson at Call Tyrone IT Services for keeping us connected. Join us every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more enlightening discussions. Thanks, and see you next week.